mean-spirited stuff like, you know, don't cry out, need something to cry about. Speaking of which, number 2.
Why do I think people use nicknames for spanking? Pull this up a little bit. Well, that's pretty simple. It's a way of dealing with something that's uncomfortable, that is negative, and honestly, I think most, and I'm going to probably say this more than once during this series of answering your questions, that people don't realize what they're doing. They don't realize that it makes them uncomfortable. They don't realize that it's a painful thing, and you don't want to say you're hitting, because, you know, and this is one of the interesting things about the replies that I've gotten from the spanking series is I've said numerous times, hitting is hitting. You know, a pop, a smack, it's a hit. It's hitting. It's striking the child. People don't want to accept that. But, you know, if one adult pops another adult, it's battery. I mean, I don't care, you know, how hard they hit them or if they didn't leave a mark. It's still battery, and it's still illegal, and it's still wrong morally, because you don't want that done to you. And that's the basis of morality, isn't it? You don't do to others anything that you don't want done to you in the same situation. So we're going to give it a new name. We're going to give it a name that sounds more lighthearted, that doesn't sound as harsh as it really is. We're going to lighten it up. And I'm going to give it an example that I think is a parallel. When you're at war with another group of people, you give that group of people a nickname. You know, goot, chink, kraut, whatever. It doesn't matter. All of those, what it does is it separates empathy from the act. And that's what I think we're doing when we say things like pop and whoop and little things like that, is that you are segregating the act so you can segregate your empathy. Because if you use your empathy, if you put yourself in that person's perspective, you're not going to take that type of action. That's the first one.
They suppress their emotions or suck it up. You know what I mean? Number 3, why do you think people use "I turned out fine"?
Why do parents tell kids to suck it up? And they don't want them to cry. They don't want to show how much it hurts emotionally and physically that they're being spanked. Let's go back to the answer that I just gave you. They don't want to see what they're doing. I mean, they're doing it, but they don't want that child to express to them, you know, that they're hurting them. Because then at that point they have to deal with the fact that they're hitting the person that they're supposed to love and take care of more than any other human being, any other thing in the world. And they're hitting them. It's wrong. So that's, to me, that's simple. You don't want to see, you want to be able to take your anger, and you want to be able to lash out like a child at this child, but you don't want to deal with the circumstances of that action, which are that you're hurting them. So that's why I think people don't want their kids to cry. And I think there are probably a few macho dickheads out there that think it toughens them up. I think that's a secondary reaction to the crying. I think the initial reaction to the crying is they don't want anything there that's going to elicit thoughts of what they're actually doing and empathy for the person that they're hitting. It makes it kind of difficult if you care about the person that you're hitting at the point in time that you're hitting them. Otherwise you wouldn't do it. I tell kids, I tell yourself and why tell others, and of course the kids that you're hitting, that I turned out fine. I was spanked. I turned out fine. Well, first of all, statistically, studies show that people who were spanked as children have impulse control issues on the whole. Now, obviously, that's not every single individual, but several studies have shown, and if you look at my Spanking 2.1 and Spanking 2.2 in the text area, I cite several of those studies. Most people who were spanked at some point in time in their life have impulse control issues. I turned out fine. What a weird thing to say. If you think about it, I turned out fine. You know, what you're saying is even though this happened, I turned out fine. Not, spanking made me the person I am today. You never hear that. Have you ever heard that in your life? Spanking made me the best person I could be. No, you hear, I turned out fine. And the subtext is, even though I was spanked. But why do they do it? Is your question. We love our parents, and even though, you know, some parents out there may have been spankers and stuff like that, that doesn't make them bad parents. You know, a lot of it, at least for people my age and older, even though I wasn't spanked by my parents, it was the times. I mean, it's what we knew. It's what people knew and what they felt was right, because they didn't have the data that we have today. You know, it's funny because a lot of people are thinking, well, you know, all these great people before were spanked and all this, and they were so great. Well, you know what? Some of the greatest minds in history also believed crazy, stupid things. You know, Isaac Newton believed in alchemy. You know, that doesn't make it right. You can't validate every single thing a person does because they were overall good people. I mean, it still means that one thing was wrong, and if you can be a better person in life by taking the good and discarding the bad, that's the intelligent response to living and learning and accepting new information, new data, and incorporating it into your life. Keep the good from the old. Discard the stuff that didn't work, that doesn't work, that does harm. And the real reason I think I turned out fine in similar statements is so pervasive is because we don't want to criticize our parents. We don't want to criticize our grandparents. We don't want to criticize Aunt Martha or Aggie who spanked us, because we love them so much. And the dichotomy of the fact that we love them so much and yet they still hit us is something that people struggle with. So they justify it, and they don't want to ever criticize. And there's a lot of people out there that feel that they should never criticize anything about their parents at all, ever. Nothing, not a period. Well, that's ridiculous. There's not a human being out there that doesn't make mistakes, that doesn't have lapses in judgment, that doesn't have false beliefs that they act on. And this sort of idolization of, or idolizing these parents is really where it comes from, is the inability to segregate the good from the bad. So they have to lump it all in there, and they've got to justify it somehow. And well, I turned out fine is probably the most apparent. You know, we all turned out fine, dude. There's the vast majority of us aren't, you know, John Wayne Gacy. It's just a way of not dealing with it. And most of what you're talking about really comes back to that. It's a way of not dealing with the reality of having to question your parents.